My name is Natalie Carter. I'm a 35-year-old single mother living with my 8-month-old daughter, Ava. We reside in Portland, Oregon, where I work as an account manager at a local advertising agency. Ava was born on a cold November night last year. After 36 hours of labor, she came into my life with a healthy cry. The moment I held her tiny hand, I knew I'd do anything for this child. I separated from Ava's father, Mark, right after the birth. He said he wasn't ready to be a father and left us suddenly. Becoming a single mother, I was filled with anxiety and confusion. That's when my mother-in-law, Linda, offered to help and moved in with us. She was 67 and had been living alone since her husband passed away. At first, I was grateful for her offer, but also felt a bit uneasy. Linda actively helped with Ava's care even after I returned to work. Her presence was truly reassuring for me, as I worked from early morning till late at night. Linda's help was indispensable. However, after a few months of living together, I began to feel uncomfortable. Linda's childcare methods differed greatly from mine. For example, she insisted that you shouldn't pick up a baby immediately when it cries, and would sometimes ignore Ava when she cried. Linda also frequently interfered with my parenting methods. I'd often heard comments like, "Young mothers these days spoil their children too much, and in our day, we raise kids more strictly." Her words sometimes hurt me, but being in a position of receiving help, I found it hard to object. Meanwhile, Ava grew day by day. Her first smile, her first rollover, and recently, she started making sounds that resembled mama. Watching her growth was my greatest joy. One weekend night, I came home unusually early. As I entered the house, I heard Linda's voice soothing Ava in the living room. "Now it's time to sleep. Grandma will put you to bed." I decided to wait quietly outside the room to observe for a moment. However, I didn't know then that this night would drastically change our lives. As I waited outside the living room, I watched Linda's bedtime routine. Her voice was gentle, as if she had been caring for babies for years. But at that moment, a small doubt sprouted in my heart. Was Linda really caring for Ava with her best interests at heart? The next morning, as I was preparing to go to work, Linda suddenly came into the kitchen. "Natalie, I saw how you put Ava to bed last night. You need to be stricter," she said. I turned around in surprise. "What do you mean?" Linda continued, "You shouldn't pick up the baby immediately when she cries. It's important to let them cry a little to develop independence." I couldn't hide my confusion at her words. But Ava is only 8 months old. I think it's too early to demand independence from a baby. Following this conversation, Linda's interference in childcare increased dramatically. She constantly negated my parenting methods and tried to impose her own ways. "You're breastfeeding too often. You're holding her too much. Reading picture books is pointless at this age." I was bombarded with criticism almost daily. I gradually began to accumulate stress. While grateful for Linda's presence, I was pained by her overly intrusive attitude. When I returned from work, I felt like Linda was even taking away my time to care for Ava. One day, I mustered up the courage to say to Linda, "Mom, I'm Ava's mother too. I have my own way of raising her." However, Linda looked at me coldly and replied, "You're too young to understand. Follow my experience." These words almost broke something inside me. I felt deeply hurt, as if my ability to parent had been denied. Still, the reality was that balancing work and childcare would be difficult without Linda's help, so I couldn't defy her. In the midst of this, I contacted Mark. We had hardly any relationship since Ava's birth, but I wanted to confide in someone about this situation. "Mark, I need to talk to you about Ava," I said over the phone, and he reluctantly agreed to meet. When we met at a cafe, there was an awkward atmosphere as we began our conversation. I talked about the friction with Linda and sought Mark's advice. However, his response was cold. "Natalie, that's your problem. It has nothing to do with me," he said flatly. I felt anger and disappointment at Mark's words. "You're Ava's father. How can you be so indifferent?" My voice was trembling. Mark let out a deep sigh and said, "I'm still not ready to be a father. I'll leave everything to you," and he stood up to leave. From that day on, I decided to completely cut ties with Mark. I felt he had no right to be involved in Ava's life. At the same time, my relationship with Linda continued to deteriorate. Her intrusive attitude escalated day by day, and I began to doubt even my own parenting judgments. The daily conflicts with my mother-in-law and the breakup with Mark, the stress of parenting reached its peak, and I was exhausted both mentally and physically. Still, every time I saw Ava smile, I strongly felt that I had to overcome these difficulties. That night, I came home late from work, completely exhausted. The clock showed 11:00 p.m. As I quietly entered the house, I found Linda watching TV in the living room. "Welcome back, Natalie," Linda said in a cold tone. "Ava is already asleep." She was particularly easy to handle today. I felt slightly relieved, but also sensed something was off. Usually, Ava would cry a lot at night, and it was always a struggle to put her to sleep. "I see, thank you," I replied as I headed towards Ava's room. As I opened the door, I could hear Ava's faint breathing in the dimly lit room. As I approached to check on her, my heart nearly stopped. Foam was coming out of Ava's mouth. "Ava!" I cried out involuntarily. I quickly picked her up, and her body was abnormally hot and limp. "Ava, open your eyes. It's Mama." Hearing my scream, Linda rushed into the room. "What happened?" "Ava is foaming at the mouth," I explained desperately. Her breathing seemed labored, and her body was hot. However, Linda's reaction was unexpected. "Don't exaggerate, you're just overreacting." I stared at Linda in disbelief. This is not overreaction. There's clearly something wrong with Ava. Linda, trying to appear calm, said, "Natalie, you're not used to childcare, so you panic over little things. Ava is just in a deep sleep." I was shaking with anger and anxiety. "This is not normal sleep. I'm calling an ambulance." As I reached for the phone, Linda grabbed my arm. "Stop it. There's no need to take her to the hospital." At that moment, something snapped inside me. I shook off Linda's hand and said firmly, "Ava is my daughter. I will protect her." I quickly grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. "Please help. My baby is foaming at the mouth and seems to be having trouble breathing." I explained while following the operator's instructions and holding Ava close. As the sound of the ambulance siren approached, Linda stood in the corner of the room with a disgruntled expression. "You're really overreacting. By tomorrow, you'll see everything is fine." But I couldn't hear her words. Feeling Ava's small body, hot and trembling in my arms, I was just desperately waiting for the paramedics to arrive. The paramedics arrived and quickly assessed Ava's condition. "We need to transport her to the hospital immediately," they said, and I let out a sigh of relief. As I was about to get into the ambulance, Linda called out, "I'll come with you." I replied without hesitation, "No, thank you. I'll be fine on my own." Linda looked surprised, but I had no time to worry about her feelings. As the ambulance doors closed and we headed to the hospital with sirens blaring, I held Ava's tiny hand tightly. "It's okay, Ava. Mama's here," I whispered. "You're going to be all right." In the ambulance, I reflected on the recent events, Linda's abnormal reaction, Ava's unnatural state, and my own intuition. I had a feeling that something much bigger was lurking beneath the surface. When we arrived at the hospital, Ava was immediately taken to the examination room. I waited in the waiting room, trembling with anxiety and fear for the doctor's diagnosis. At this point, I still didn't know about the terrifying truth that was about to be revealed. In the hospital waiting room, I spent a long time praying for my daughter's safety. Eventually, Dr. Fields appeared and called me into the examination room. "Miss Carter, please have a seat," he said, his expression serious. "We need to talk about Ava's condition." I sat down with trembling hands and listened to the doctor's words. We've got Ava's blood test results. A significant amount of benzodiazepine class drugs was detected in her system. I was at a loss for words. Drugs? But how? I stammered. Dr. Fields continued cautiously. This type of drug is typically used to treat anxiety or insomnia. However, it should never be administered to someone of Ava's age. Her symptoms are clearly due to an overdose. Various thoughts swirled in my head. I couldn't understand how Ava could have ingested such drugs. Ms. Carter, in situations like this, we are obligated to report to Child Protective Services, the doctor said quietly. At those words, I came to my senses. Wait, please. I would never do anything to harm my daughter. There must be some explanation for this. Dr. Fields looked at me with sympathetic eyes. I understand. However, this is a serious situation. Ava's safety must be our top priority. When I returned to the hospital room, my heart ached at the sight of Ava receiving an IV drip. Looking at the tubes connected to her small body, I made a decision. I must uncover the truth behind this. When I got home, Linda was already asleep. I quietly entered Ava's room and started searching for any clues around the crib, in the toy box, inside the dresser, but I found nothing. Suddenly, my eyes turned to Linda's room. It would be an invasion of her privacy, but for Ava's safety, I had no choice. I quietly snuck into her room, and my attention was drawn to the nightstand drawer. When I opened it, I found several bottles of pills inside. Checking the labels, I saw they were the benzodiazepine class drugs the doctor had mentioned. It can't be. I was speechless. The next morning, I decided to confront Linda about the truth. Mom, we need to talk about last night. I began nervously. Linda responded with a composed expression. What is it? Drugs were detected in Ava's body, the same kind you have. Linda's expression froze for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. What are you talking about? What about my medication? Mom, please be honest. Did you give Ava your pills? Linda suddenly became furious. How dare you say such a thing? I would never hurt Ava. This reaction only strengthened my suspicions. However, I still lacked decisive evidence. That afternoon, I contacted Mark. I explained the situation and asked for his cooperation. Natalie, that's terrible, but what can I do? Mark answered hesitantly. Mark, you're Ava's father. Let's uncover the truth together. After a long silence, Mark sighed. All right, I'll help as much as I can. We made a plan. Mark would come to the house and distract Linda while I thoroughly searched her room. On the day of our plan, Mark arrived as scheduled. Linda was surprised by the sudden visit of her granddaughter's father, but began entertaining him in the living room. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I snuck into Linda's room. As I carefully searched through drawers and shelves, I found what appeared to be a diary. When I opened it, I found shocking content written inside. Ava's crying is too loud to sleep. Tried giving her a small dose of sleeping pills. It worked, so I'm relieved. Natalie doesn't listen to my advice. This child is being spoiled too much. I'll increase the dose a bit more. My hands were shaking. This was the decisive evidence. When I returned to the living room, Mark and Linda were deep in conversation. I gave Mark a knowing look, and he nodded in understanding. Linda, we need to talk, I said with a trembling voice. Linda looked puzzled. What is it? I know everything about you giving Ava drugs. The color drained from Linda's face. What are you talking about? I took out the diary. This is the evidence. Linda was at a loss for words and collapsed into a chair. Mark stood next to me with a shocked expression. Why did you do this? Mark asked. Linda answered through tears. I just wanted to keep Ava quiet. I thought Natalie's way of raising her was wrong. My chest felt like it was going to burst with anger and sadness, but at the same time, I felt relieved that the truth had come to light. Linda, you can't stay here anymore, I said firmly. Mark placed his hand on my shoulder and quietly said, Natalie, I'll help too. to protect Ava. At that moment, I saw a sign of reconciliation between Mark and me. We made a decision to fight together for Ava's future. After Linda's confession, the atmosphere in the room was tense. I took a deep breath and considered my next move. Linda, your actions are unforgivable. You put Ava's life at risk, I said as calmly as I could. Linda looked up, this time with eyes full of anger. What do you know? I was thinking of Ava's best interests. That's not love, I interrupted. Your actions are abuse. At those words, Linda's expression contorted. Abuse? Don't be ridiculous. She stood up and walked towards me. Mark tried to intervene, but I stopped him with my hand. This issue had to be resolved by me. Linda, I can't let you stay here anymore. I'm going to call the police, I announced with a shaking voice. At that moment, madness flickered in Linda's eyes. You don't understand anything, she screamed and suddenly lunged at me. Mark moved quickly to restrain Linda. Mom, stop it. Taking advantage of this, I pulled out my phone and called 911. Please help. A family member has been giving drugs to my baby. She's becoming violent now. For the few minutes until the police arrived, the room was filled with an eerie tension. Linda, still restrained by Mark, glared at me with hatred. When the police officers entered the house, I let out a sigh of relief. I explained the situation and submitted the diary as evidence. Linda Carter, you're under arrest on suspicion of child abuse, the officer announced, and the color drained from Linda's face. As I watched her being handcuffed and led away, I was overwhelmed with complex emotions, anger, sadness, and a bit of relief. After the police left, Mark and I sat quietly in the living room. After a long silence, Mark spoke up. Natalie, I'm really sorry. I should have been involved with Ava sooner. I let out a deep sigh. Mark, I was disappointed in your response. It's true, but I'm grateful for your cooperation in this matter. Mark looked at me with a serious expression. From now on, I want to work together for Ava's sake. Those words lit a small flame of hope in my heart. A few weeks later, Ava fully recovered and returned home. Seeing her smile made me feel that all the difficulties we had overcome were worth it. True to his word, Mark became actively involved in parenting. It became a regular sight to see him taking Ava to the park on weekends or reading picture books together. We're not a perfect family, but we're building a relationship where we respect each other and prioritize Ava's happiness. One day, when Ava called me Mama for the first time, tears welled up in my eyes. I was filled with gratitude for having overcome the hardships and made it this far. The future looks bright and full of hope. I believe we can surely give Ava the best life possible. With this belief, I continue to move forward. After Linda's arrest, the following weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures and investigations. Child Protective Services visited frequently, interviewing both Mark and me. They scrutinized every detail of our home life, ensuring that Ava was in a safe and loving environment. During these visits, Mark's support was invaluable. He stood by my side, demonstrating his newfound commitment to being a father. Eventually, Linda pleaded guilty to child endangerment and was sentenced to community service and mandatory counseling. It was a lenient sentence, but at least Ava was safe, and I had taken back control of our lives. I kept thinking about the twisted logic that led Linda to believe she was doing what was best for Ava. That mindset, combined with her overpowering nature, made her a danger to my daughter. I realized that no amount of family history or gratitude for help could justify compromising Ava's safety. As for Mark, he made a genuine effort to change. He began attending parenting classes and therapy sessions to deal with his earlier resistance to fatherhood. Slowly, he earned back my trust. I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to completely repair our relationship, but seeing him become a loving, responsible father for Ava has been more than I could have hoped for. We've established a co-parenting arrangement that works for us, and Ava is thriving. I'm learning to let go of the past and embrace the future, one filled with hope and possibility for my daughter and me. Ava's laughter fills the house, and her smile reminds me every day that standing up for her was the best decision I ever made. Even when the road ahead seems daunting, I know I have the strength to protect my daughter and give her the love and security she deserves. With every new milestone, her first steps, her first words, I feel more confident in our future. We're a family now, not bound by traditional definitions, but by our love and commitment to Ava's happiness. And for me, that's more than enough. I will continue to move forward, putting Ava's well-being above all else and making sure that she grows up in an environment of love, safety, and trust. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. Ava is my world, and I am determined to give her the best life possible, a life free from fear, filled with warmth, and surrounded by people who genuinely care. As I look down at her sleeping peacefully in her crib, I whisper softly, "We've made it, Ava. We're going to be okay. Mama's here, always." With that, I close the chapter on our past and turn toward a future filled with promise. One day at a time.